evening, you're with ET now. This is the India Development Debate. I'm Sandeep, Gurumurthi broadcasting from Mumbai. Joining me in Delhi is my colleague Supriya, Shrinate. Straight to the big debate tonight. The Indian banking industry is in a mess. The board of Axis Bank today decided to end the term of its CEO Shikha Sharma by December this year and said it will find a successor to her by the year end. In a filing with stock exchanges, the bank said it has accepted Sharma's request to cut short her term to 6 months without giving any reasons. Now remember, Shikha's term was to end in June this year, but the bank reappointed her for 3 more years. Just last week, ET had reported how the RBI had asked the bank to reconsider the move to extend Shikha's term. Her exit comes amid plunging profits and a spike in bad loans. Axis Bank's decision to cut short Shikha Sharma's term comes at a time when another top banker, Chanda Kochhar, is finding the going tough as ICICI's top boss was investigating agencies launching her probe against her husband.
Now, what we learn is that the bank's large institutional investors are not happy with Chanda's continuation amidst reports that the bank's board is a divided house on this critical issue. Top government sources meanwhile tell ET now that the government may stay neutral and its nominee director, Lok Ranjan, is unlikely to attend the bank's board meeting, which is likely to take up the issue. The developments at 2 of India's largest private banks have shaken up the industry, which is still recovering from the 13,000 crore rupee Nirav Modi Mehul Choksi bank scam that involved one of the largest lenders, Punjab National Bank. The rot in the Indian banking industry and its ramifications is a big topic of discussion and debate right here on the India Development Debate tonight. And I've got a stellar panel joining me right here on this show this evening. I've got Mr. D.K. Mittal, former Banking Secretary of India. I've got Ila Patnaik, economist and professor at NIPFP. Heminder Hazari, banking expert. Shantanu Sen, former Joint Director, CBI. Prabal Basu Roy, PE investor, corporate advisor and commentator. So thanks each one of you, and we can't thank you enough for being with us this evening. Heminder Hazari, let me start things with you. And just when we were walking into the show, the news broke that Shikha Sharma has requested for her own tenure to be reduced, and that request has been acceded to. Of course, the final decision is with the RBI now. Is this a face saver for the Axis chief, given the fact that just days before you had the banking regulator that wrote to Axis board asking them to reconsider her reappointment for a 4th term? Do you believe at best this evening we can say that the trimming of the tenure perhaps is just a face saver?
It is most definitely a face saver. And let me also tell you that her term ends as of end May. So therefore, I fail to understand how the board of Axis Bank can ask for a term of 6 more months. Now, if the banking regulator deems her unfit to continue as CEO for 3 years, how can the banking regulator deem it fit for her to continue for 6 months? And I think it will be grave injustice to shareholders, to the depositors and the public if the Reserve Bank of India allows this 6 months extension. In my view, and I've been arguing this for the last 3 to 4 years in my written research, she should have been removed as the CEO of Axis Bank about 2 years ago. Axis Bank under her is a case study of mismanagement. Profits have collapsed, NPAs have risen, the accounts cannot be trusted, operational risk is in shambles, and this is all happening under her leadership. The board should have removed her 2 years ago. Instead, what does the board of Axis Bank do? They keep rewarding her with increments, bonuses, stock options. Now, this is what corporate governance is all about in the private sector. We all like to scorn on the corporate governance in public sector, but here there is no accountability for the CEO. The board does what it likes. Instead of removing a CEO, they reward her, then they prematurely extend her, term. So this is, it's all, it's very shameful to see what is going on in some of these banks. And they are supposed to be the very models of corporate governance. And this is what corporate governance in these bank boards is all about.
Oh, yes. I think the slew of these cases have certainly raised questions on corporate governance standards in private banks, when the spotlight was all about PSU banks and how they are mismanaged, how their boards are dysfunctional. And now you have 2 high-profile cases in 2 leading private sector banks. But Mr. D.K. Mittal, let's get your reaction first on this big breaking story and the larger message here in terms of the action taken by the central bank, sort of the nudge to ensure that the term is cut short, and the board is now taking a cue from its missive from the RBI last week and has now reached some sort of an amicable settlement and offered a graceful exit to Shikha Sharma. How are you reading this action taken by the central bank and the consequence thereof?
Well, this is one of the few cases when regulator has really put their foot down. We may still debate whether it is right or wrong, but fact remains that accountability has to be brought in to the banking sector. And this applies equally to private sector banks and public sector banks. And I'm confident RBI will also move similarly for public sector banks, where they have to bring the government on board, and they need to ensure that some of the CEOs or some of the number twos there also are removed similarly for lack of performance and for lack of accountability.
Okay, so you expect them to follow suit as far as public sector banks also are concerned. But I'm really going to take this across to Ila Patnaik. And Ila Patnaik, while Hemendra Hazari raises the question that why has her term in fact been extended even by 6 months if it has been, the question also remains that in some sense, the regulator has had his way. They had written to the to Axis Bank. They've denied it. In fact, now we're given to understand that Axis has, in fact, appointed Egon Zehnder to look for the next CEO. Do you believe the RBI has, like Mr. Mittal said, put its foot down and had his way on this one?
See, I think let's step back a minute and talk about the role that the supervisor has been playing. So, the RBI is both the banking regulator and the banking supervisor. So, what is the role of the supervisor and what it should it have done? When loans start getting into trouble, so whether it is in the Nirav Modi case that, so regardless of the ownership structure, the ownership is another issue and we can come to that. But regardless of who the owner of a bank is, if there is if the core banking system does not talk to SWIFT, or in the ICICI case there is a conflict of interest, or in the Axis case they have seen certain risks being created that should have been curbed. I think what is very important is to ask the question, has the supervisor caught these things in time? Because of course, after, as the first speaker said, after NPAs have increased, after profitability has come down, after operational risks have increased, then if it steps in, is it fulfilling its role? Its role is microprudential regulation, and that is to ensure safety and soundness of each and every bank that it regulates, regardless of who the owner is, regardless of what the corporate governance structure is. And I think what is coming across very clearly, whether it is the rising NPAs of public sector banks, and certainly some of the accounts of private sector banks have also been not provisioning and showing loans as bad loans long after they had gone bad, or whether it is the Nirav Modi case where there was corruption that was happening and the RBI was talking in seminars and warning banks that, look, your CBS is not talking to your SWIFT. Or whether it is the case of ICICI where there might be a potential conflict of interest. I think it's time for us to ask whether the supervisor has acted in time, promptly, before the bank becomes a risky bank. And that's really the question of today. And it's been the supervisor for 70 years. It's not as if it's a responsibility that it is acquiring today and therefore will do things properly in the future. It's about how is it performed till now and what needs to be done to make sure that the supervisor performs.
Okay, Ila Patnaik, they're raising a valid point there on the role of the supervisor on the RBI, whether this action is coming too little, is it too little, too late, and if you see in the context of the other high-profile cases, surely it raises a few questions, and that is something we will debate on this show this evening. But Prabal Basu Roy, even as we talk about the supervisor, it's important to also put the spotlight on the boards of these companies. As Hemendra Hazari pointed out as well, the fact that this action happened because the central bank almost had to nudge the board to take this decision, and even in another case, the role of the board, the decisions taken by the board are very much under the scanner. The independent directors on the boards of these companies, the chairman of the boards of these companies and their role thereof, is that also very much under the scanner now?
Oh, absolutely, Sandeep. In fact, like the first speaker said, it is primarily a case, firstly, of the governance structure and the way governance is managed in India. At the moment, we are talking about private sector banks, but it applies to public sector banks and even some other institutions as well. So, it's a very cozy relationship between the CEO and the board and things like that. And that is the crux of the issue. We'll come to it in the Chanda Kochhar case separately. But in this case too, the fact that the bank was not performing was pretty evident to everybody. Of course, we can argue that this issue was across all banks and it was a phase in the cycle, economic cycle, etc. But the fact of the matter is that, cycle or not, I mean, you're supposed to anticipate many of these things. And the thing which really concerns me here is that obviously it was the RBI's nudge which got the board to sort of, retract on its earlier decision by giving this face saver, etc. And while NPAs were known, this WhatsApp leak of the results were known, etc. Is there anything else which has precipitated this? That's the question which I think nobody has answered and we will never know. Why come back to this decision so soon after giving her an extension, etc.? So that question will always be in our minds. But nevertheless, yes, absolutely. I mean, it calls for a good revamp of what the board governance should be like. And like I mentioned, you can't legislate your way through rules, etc. There's this question of character, how you actually, perform in the board, in terms of taking a contrary point of view and being independent. And independent cannot be legislated; it just cannot be. So that's the basic issue, effectively. This is a larger issue, though. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Roy, just hold your thoughts there, and I'm going to come to you next, Mr. Sen, in just a bit. But I will take a very quick question to Mr. Mittal. And Mr. Mittal, the question on Axis Bank, yes, the regulator perhaps was very late. Axis had to finally concede to what the regulator put its foot down to. But the reality is that Axis in this entire scheme of things is a peculiar case, because the government at least held till not too long back a very substantial amount of stake in Axis Bank through SOTI. Even now holds about 9% has a nominee. I'm just trying to understand, can the government completely skirt away from the controversy at Axis? I mean, what is that stake worth if you're not going to have any say, and if you're not going to have any say in governance, in some of the issues that have been raised? Look at the number of controversies that have plagued Axis Bank, which has of course now all amounted to the fact that Shikha Sharma's term has been reduced. But what about the government's own stake?
Well, SOTI's stake was in a context, it was acquired by the government, that we all aware. But we always have been telling that government is totally incompetent, they don't know how to govern public sector banks. So how do you govern a bank with 15% stake? I think that's a question I'll say. The larger question is whether we have right governance and we have the right supervision. I think this is a very right question raised by some of the speakers, and we need to focus on that. Government can do little with 10%, 15% stake, and you would have many more entities where directly and indirectly government stake will be 20% or so. But it does not mean that government should start interfering in the management of those entities. So I don't think government can do much in the corporate governance except what is coming through the board. And they have a representative who has to represent the the best view, which is available to him or her at the time of the meeting of the board.
Okay, let's not beat around the bush. Hemendra Hazari, direct question to you then. What is going to be the fallout of this on the other high-profile case with regards to ICICI Bank? Is this in some sense going to put pressure on the CEO of ICICI Bank, Chanda Kochhar, to step down?
You've seen all kinds of pressure in the last few days being brought on Chanda Kochhar, but she refuses to step down. Now, what do you do in that case? You see, in such a case, it would have been prudent for the board, if she refuses to step down, to have made her to step down and get an external investigator, get an interim CEO in the interim. But here you see everyone is just rushing to endorse her performance. Not only does the board endorse her performance, the chairman of the board comes out and endorses her performance. Then they get their iconic earlier chairman, Mr. Vagul, who keeps talking about, she's a model of integrity. And every new day you see that her brother-in-law is being questioned by the Central Bureau of Investigation. There is an informal, CBI notice that they have to be informed if any of them were to leave the country. Now, this is, every hour that passes with her in the post, the brand of ICICI Bank is diminishing. The domestic depositors should be concerned. The international image of Indian banking is now exposed. ICICI is traded on the New York Stock Exchange. This opens up to class action suits. But nobody in the Axis Bank board is least bothered about the image of ICICI Bank. All they are concerned is defending their CEO. And this is what I say, the sad state of affairs in corporate India today, that we keep blaming public sector, and here we see an outstanding example of how boards behave. All they do is to protect their CEO. Independent directors are merely ornamental nameplates. I've always argued that most of them, the only thing independent about them is their name, independent, and that's about it. And this is what I say, this is where you see character coming in. You see, any other lower employee with these charges would have been removed. But here in the case of the senior management, they are given extensions. Everybody comes to endorse their integrity and their performance. So you seem to have a different level of performance for the CEO and a very totally different level of performance matrix for juniors. Now, this is what I say is what's going on, and this is all happening in a free market where there should be accountability, right, but there is absolutely no accountability.
Right. Just Mr. Hemendra Hazare, your point well noted, but I think it's our job to put the contrarian point on board as well. And I think just to play the devil's advocate, let me take this point across to Mr. Sen here, who's been with the CBI, before. Mr. Sen, while, Mr. Hemendra Hazare makes one side of the argument, and the other side of the argument is that this is an allegation. Nothing has been proven. There's an investigative agency that's probing into this entire matter. Shouldn't one wait for the CBI investigation to get over? Shouldn't one wait for some concrete evidence, some concrete report from India's premier investigative agency? It's no less than the CBI that's probing this matter.
You have called this an allegation, and rightly so. Well, allegation after investigation is decided whether it is proved or non-proven. So, the PE is on. Now, PE in the CBI is a preliminary inquiry. It is not a secret inquiry, it's an open inquiry, and it is a part of the investigations under section 154 CRPC, which says, before a commission of a cognizance offence, the investigating officer must be satisfied an offence has occurred. So, the Supreme Court has upheld in various judgments the PE. So, PE is a regular investigation, statements are required, summons are issued, and people are asked to appear before the investigating officer. Now, in this Kochhar's case, the suspicion is very grave. The conflict of interest is so obvious and so glaring that I am surprised that CBI has not yet converted this case into a regular investigation. Look at the facts. December 2008, this new power renewable energy gets into going. Venugopal Dhut and Deepak Kochhar's family, both families are involved in the setting up of this power group. Within a month, he sheds it. And Venugopal Dhut becomes important. He leaves. Deepak Kochhar's family takes it over. And then another company is floated by Venugopal Dhut, the Supreme Energy. And what is its prospectus? Is it to give loans? It is supposed to come up a company which is supposed to work on energy. But it gives loan, 64 crores to whom? The company which it has shed. Glaring instance of conflict. And then what happens? Supreme Energy subsequently through various modes and methods becomes a part of the Kochhar family group. And all the Kochhars are involved. Deepak Kochhar, his brother Rajiv, Chanda Kochhar's brother.
Mr. Sen, if I may interrupt you.
Very serious.
Yeah, Mr. Sen, if I may interrupt you, if I may interrupt you,
Sorry, let me not.
Very briefly, sir, I have a quick follow-up question to you only, because the facts of the case are well known. I think everyone in the panel and our viewer know the facts of the case. I have a quick follow-up question for you only, sir, before I take it.
Therefore, the question was that the question was an allegation. It is no longer an allegation; it's a charge.
Okay.
And the CBI should convert this into a regular case, and Chanda Kochhar should remove herself. In my view, it's a very grave allegation of conflict of interest.
Okay, you are saying
how much money was paid? All this has gone NP. And one more fact:
Okay.
We know
Mr.
the
Sen, a
facts
very quick
that
question. Why do you
Rajiv
think is it
Kochhar
taking the CBI so long to file an
runs a
FIR, if at all?
loan
If
company.
you could help us understand the process from here on, sir, what is the next step? Is it a given now? I mean, why is it then taking the CBI so much time? If it's an open and shut case, why are they not filing an FIR?
It is not an open and shut case yet. It's a preliminary inquiry, and according to the CBI manual, CBI takes a minimum of 4 to 6 months to complete the inquiry. CBI, it's a very grave charge. These people will fight tooth and nail. They are a very powerful group. CBI can't play ducks and drakes. CBI has to go about it slowly. CBI has remained quiet. CBI has given no statements. CBI has been alert. CBI has not allowed a Vijay Mallya and Nirav Modi instance to take place. I give full credit to CBI's quiet probe. But the facts are known, and to me the facts appear pretty serious. And I am sure CBI will consider them carefully and convert this into a regular investigation against the coaches and ICICI, I think.
Okay. Sure. I think Mr. Mittal wants to come in here before I go across to Ila. Yes.
These cases we are debating, but let's keep the interest of the country in mind. The financial sector, particularly banking, is the rock bottom, solid bottom of the economy. No, let's not make such impression to everybody, I mean the viewers, that Indian banking system is totally useless and dishonest. No, charges have been made, allegations have been made, but I think everybody needs a very natural justice. Let it be investigated properly. And after if the investigation done, please. In case of Mr. Shikha Sharma, there are no allegations of any corruption. It is a question performance based, which could be debated whether this is right or wrong. So let me just complete. So the question would be, we should be very.
No, I understand, sir. Just 1 second, let him finish his point. Go ahead, Mr. Mittal.
Moderate when we express any views about these top CEOs. I'm not trying to defend Mrs. Kochhar or Mrs. Shikha Sharma. The question is, they represent very key banking entities of the country, and let the impression not float around that the Indian banking system is so bad that all CEOs are involved into that. If there is an investigation going on, we respect that out, let the result come out. And I'm confident if RBI was assured or they had information that there's so much of wrongdoing in the case of Mrs. Kochhar, they would have acted upon very swiftly on this also. So I am also saying that let it be investigated properly. Let's give everybody due share. While we respect that banking system should be kept intact, but we should also respect each individual's personal integrity also.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you there. I think you're also giving us a cue for our question as far as the regulator's role is concerned. And I know Ila Patnaik has been rather critical of that. So, Ms. Patnaik, coming to you, I specifically want to ask you this question as far as the ICICI case is concerned. What do you make of the regulator's silence? The ICICI chairman says regulator had sought information, the bank had provided that. He can't give out specifics because this is privileged information exchange between the regulator on one hand and the bank on the other. And it would be appropriate to go public with that, is of course he believes it's going to be inappropriate. My question is, does this cut ice at this stage, because there is so much water that has flown under that first statement and now? And what do you make of the regulator's own silence? Are we to assume that the RBI is satisfied with the response that it has gone, given the uncertainty? Should the RBI be speaking more proactively about it? Should it be putting out facts that it has found out publicly? Because there is just so much speculation on what the RBI asked, what sort of information was given, and is the regulator satisfied with it at all? Because the RBI's role is not just regulation, it's also supervision, and one is interested and very keen to know what the regulator makes of this controversy.
The allegations started sometime in 2016, if I am to believe newspaper reports. And so my first question would be, what was RBI doing since 2016? Were those allegations investigated? What is the CBI doing even before the RBI has started doing anything? I mean, we are all very talking about the CBI and the ED in carrying out an investigation, but that happens after a crime is reported, whereas even before there is any crime, it need not even be a crime. It need be a conflict of interest, it needs to be a lacuna in the system, it needs to be how you provision for an asset, how you report the performance of an asset. Even before a crime, there is a long period when the bank is on the books of when a loan is on the books of the bank, and the supervisor, and especially in the ICICI case, This was a systemically important bank. It has been called a systemically important bank by the RBI, which means that it has heightened supervision compared to other entities which are not systemically important. And in that scenario, my question is, what was the RBI doing? What has it done so far? Of course, it's very strange that even after a criminal investigation is being carried out by the CBI, the RBI remains silent. I mean, that is even stranger. But you know, if I may just make one more observation, we should not miss the woods for the trees. So, we are talking about individuals, we are talking about their characteristics, and then we are saying, okay, one bank, private, there is criminal activity, a second bank there is non-performance, a third bank it's a public sector bank where systems were not talking to each other, and many other public sector banks where the systems were not integrated, and then we say there are all these NPAs that were perhaps did not were not able to become restructured and did not really work well. Are we missing the woods for the trees? We are picking each individual case and saying that that's the problem and not looking at the systemic problem as a whole. Why are we not asking the question, what is common between these two? What was the banking supervisor missing? Why is the CBI and ED stepping in, which is at a very late stage? So really, I mean, I think that that's where today, when all this has happened, that's where the focus should be, and not individuals. Of course, some individuals might have done wrong, some might not have done wrong, but that should have been caught long ago.
That's a fair point you're making, but let me take it to the other experts on the panel as well. Prabal Basu Roy, if I could come to you then on the point made there by Ila Patnaik on on the silence of the regulator, and she said the ICICI Bank specifically is seen as a systematically important bank. It's too big a bank to fail or to have some sort. Is that a justification? Could that be a reason why the RBI is treading cautiously? Where because the bank chairman in that press conference said emphatically that the RBI sought for some details. We provided those details, and so that communication is between us and the RBI and doesn't need to be in the public domain. So I can understand why the ICICI board wants it to be that way. I don't understand why the RBI wants it to be that way. Could it be because it's a very significant bank? You don't want to cause panic. You don't want to give this impression that all is not well in the banking system. Could that be a reason why the RBI is treading cautiously?
Sandeep, you have to give me about a minute to actually explain this, because I'll just take you back to, you may know that this, immediately after the presser on last week, the first article in the national media on this issue was in Business World, which I had authored. And there were certain specific things which we had called for there. See, the essential issue is, I believe there is no choice but for Chanda Kochhar to step aside. I'm not saying it's a resignation. I'm not asking for, not making any allegations. And I made it clear in that article, though I was trolled for it. And the choice is not there for two reasons. First, the two main players in this entire imbroglio, one is the government and one is the board. As far as the government is concerned, and Prime Minister Modi's office in particular, this issue was raised 2 years ago, just like the Nirav Modi case was. So I believe in this time at least, there will be, I don't believe he has a choice. And by he, I mean the investigative agencies, etc. What they were doing for the last 2 years, we don't know. What the RBI was doing, I don't know. The whistleblower's letter was given to every institution possible, SEBI, RBI, CBI, ED, etc. So 2 years have gone by. So let's not pussyfoot the issue, right? So this is one. So I believe the government, especially in the current context, has really no choice in the matter but to progress on this equivocally and strongly, number one. As far as the board is concerned, you see, if the board cares to introspect, I think they'll come to the conclusion that they had hastily, within a matter of a couple of days, hastily actually, given a clean chit to Chanda Kochhar, number one, and said unstinted support, etc., all that. I think this was done hastily because primarily for two reasons. And by taking this action, what they actually did was preclude a impartial investigation, say by a law firm, etc., on their own. They actually precluded that option totally, which, just by the way, Infosys did. a few months ago. So that action was precluded. Of course, now we are hearing that even government nominees were not on that particular board meeting. So that itself raises questions, right? I mean, these sort of things. And thirdly, Mr. M.C. Sharma, he's an illustrious man, all that. But the way the presser was convened and he walked away without giving any question, without taking any questions whatsoever, I think that was not done. And it was insulting the Indian public and the media, etc. And fourthly, and most importantly, this whole thing is about Deepak Kochhar, Videocon, their dealings, all this, the data we all know. The fact of the matter is, why is the bank coming into it? Why is the bank? If anyone, Chanda Kochhar should have been answering these personal questions, and not the bank's board. And if the bank's board is answering the question,
okay,
they were taking it as a credit appraisal process. My credit, so that is not the point. Correct. So the whole
I get
thing
that.
is
There's
actually,
a demarcation. I get that point.
It's quite messed up.
I get that.
Correct.
Professor, I get your point. There has to be a demarcation between the bank giving the loan and was systemic procedures followed there vis-a-vis disclosures that were not made. And I think that kind of differentiation, yes, needs to be, and those lines have been blurred. But Hemendra Hazari, coming to you, and I'm just going to quickly ask one more question on the regulator's role per se. It was just about 10 to 12 days back when Governor Urjit Patel had said very categorically that there is asymmetric control that RBI has over public and private sector banks. It's got far more control in supervision, in appointing or in, reappointing or actually barring people from becoming directors and coming to the board or being MDs and CEOs of private sector bank. I mean, one is curious to know, where is that control today? Why is he and why is RBI not asserting that supervision, not asserting that control? Especially once he has put it in public that there is asymmetric control that the RBI has over public and private sector banks, far more on the private entities than the public ones. One is curious to understand, why no assertion of control today?
A simple answer which no one would like to acknowledge is regulatory capture. You see, the private sector banks, what they have done is over the years, you will find lot of the children of government officials, lot of the children of RBI officials are given employment in these private sector banks, and the quid pro quo is that they go soft on regulation. Everybody in RBI knows this. Nobody talks about it publicly, and this is what happens. You see, it's most unfortunate. And as a son of an RBI former officer, I'm gravely disappointed at the way the RBI has been conducting itself in bank supervision, in their role in demonetization. You see, this is one of the great institutions of India. It predates independence. It has had a very long, illustrious, track record. But sadly, in the last few years, we see a steady erosion of credibility, of competence. And even now, as you say, why is it that the RBI is not taking action? And this is, to me, they could have done it through moral persuasion. They could have just told the board, just make her step down, get in an external investigator, let them do the investigation, then she can be brought back on if, they don't find anything. But nothing of the sort is done. The RBI under Urjit Patel seems to take a vow of silence all the time. We saw this in demonetization. The public, the analyst community, the markets are looking to the RBI today, like what does the RBI, have to say about all this, is what is happening. But the RBI has this, just a stone wall of silence, and therefore erodes its credibility and the credibility of the nation as well.
Okay, that's a fair point you're making. DK Mittal, important point, should focus away from RBI to the board and to the role of the government as well. The government, we understand from top sources in the government that its nominee director will not attend the next meeting of ICICI Bank, where we are given to understand the decision may be taken on the continuing of Chanda Kochhar. The government wants to steer clear from the controversy. What do you make of that move? I mean, why have a nominee director if he's not going to have a say, if he or she is not going to have a say in the decisions taken by the board of the bank? In any case, we are given to understand that when the board met the last time around and endorsed the CEO, two independent directors, which is the government nominee and the LIC nominee, were both not present in the meeting. So I don't understand why. What do you make of this government's reluctance to have its independent director attend the board meet and put forward the government's point of view?
No, I do not think so. Government will ask its nominee director not to be present in the board meeting. That's not a fair point. The nominee directors always, they make it a point to join the meeting personally or through video conference. That's how it happens in DFS. So I'm confident in this very serious matter, they will also participate in this board meeting and they will take a view along with the other members, but they will put down their point of view. Now I'd like to say two points. There isn't a point in really running down our institutions. I'll have a strong view on that. We may have a debate on what they are doing and we should have suggestions given to them that this is what they should be doing. Let's not run down regulators because of any individuals. The second part is regulators also have to see that they do not bring lot many things in public limelight, but they have to act, in the backyard. In the case of like Axis Bank, perhaps a better thing would have been to convey it orally and then get the compliance done. These things have to be done that way. Otherwise, we would not have been debating what happened to Mr. Shikha Sharma. So my suggestion would be, our country is more important to us, our institutions are more important to us, we need to protect them. It is very easy for us to destroy them. And let's not create so much of despondency that everybody feels that if the RBI does not work, banks do not work, government does not work, then who's going to work? Who's going to run the country? So I think we are overblowing the situation. The fact remains that regulator is acting in one case and they need to act in other cases. They need to improve their supervision. That point made by Madam Patnaik is perfectly agreed. They need to upscale their capabilities. That's perfectly fine. All these need to be done. That point is very well taken. And if you want to criticize RBI or to comment RBI on that point, I am with you on that point, that we should support them. But let's not run down institutions. That is very bad from the country perspective.
And there should be no loss in faith in institutions as well. Your point well taken, because the country has to govern with very robust institutions. We wouldn't want to run them down. We'll just come to you in a minute, sir. Ms. Patnaik, I do want to ask a follow-up question. Given the fact that Mr. Amit Agarwal, the government nominee, did not make it to the last board meeting, the LIC chairman, and LIC holds about over 9.6% stake in ICICI Bank, did not make it either. I mean, is this a certain situation where, skirting the controversy seems to be a solution and not taking it head on, not giving their own versions, not giving their own views on this?
See, I don't know what is the good of, what good comes out of government nominees attending bank board meetings in any case. From what I have understood, all government nominees attend public sector bank board meetings. They usually get, their agendas one day ahead of time, and then they go and attend meetings. They don't know what's going on there. Loans get given to Vijay Mallya's and to just about all the large companies that exist, which then turn NPAs. So I don't know that that's such a even to begin with, that having government nominees on those boards is actually something that is going to make those boards function well. So at this time, to think that that is the main issue, I think it's a bit misleading. I think we need to really go back to thinking about what is the role of the board, what is the role of the management, does the board control the management at all, does the board know what the management is doing, and are the independent directors looking after the interests of the shareholders? I think we need to worry about, we have members of the RBI, officials of the RBI sitting on boards of public sector banks. I mean, the regulator sitting on the bank board, and those banks, 11 almost 15 of which come under prompt corrective action, and 2.1 trillion rupees go into recapitalizing them. I mean, we really need to think about the system as a whole, and I am not saying that we should, in the interest of the nation, that we should be not be critical, and I am saying that we need to reform these institutions, and to reform them, one has to understand what is going wrong. We can't keep pretending that it's just the board, it's just the individual, it's just one lady or her family or another lady or her family. The issue is far deeper. I'm not being critical of a regulator simply because it's something to create panic, but with the positive agenda of asking what are the questions, what needs to be corrected, what reforms need to be done. And I don't think government representatives should be on the board of banks.
Okay.
Or that regulators or supervisors should at all be on the board of banks.
Absolutely. The very point, very well taken. The rot is far deeper, and we will touch upon that. I need to take a break, but before that, two interjections. Shantanu Sen wanted to come in on one point, and I think Hemendra Hazari wanted to come in as well on the point, on the larger point of, we should not damage institutional credibility. Shantanu Sen, I come to you first, and then Hemendra Hazari for a quick interjection, and then we take a short break. Shantanu Sen.
No, I think Mrs. Ila Patnaik has said whatever I wanted to say. We can't blow hot and cold today. The institutions are in trouble, and the trouble is from the top. Let's be blunt about it. And if we don't say it, who will say it? Saving the institution is our birthright too. After all, I did the investigations in the Harshad Mehta case. The RBI was in serious trouble. The RBI chairman lost his job. He wasn't given any extension, and that is how the RBI corrected itself. I think the RBI is in trouble, the regulators are in trouble, and it is our duty to point that out. It is not putting them down, it is only pointing out the truth. And Mrs. Patnaik has put it best, and so has Mr. Hazari. I ditto what they say.
Hazari, quick point here, then I'm taking a break.
I think it's very important that in the role of a democracy, you must have critics. We are not there to degrade institutions. We are there to try to improve upon it. And it is always my firm conviction that I think RBI is a great institution and it should be strengthened. It can be strengthened through criticism. I welcome Mr. Mittal's criticism of me. I think that's, it's all part of the job in a democracy. But to say that, we cannot criticize institutions because we'll run them down, that is not the purpose. I think criticism is extremely healthy. Nobody may like it, but it has to be appreciated, and we have to really, that's the way, institutions and individuals can improve.
No, I tend to agree to some extent with what you said. I tend to agree with some of the points that Mr. Mittal made as well. It's a fragile system. You don't want to lose confidence of people. You don't want depositors in the country to be wondering, is their money safe? Because that the collateral damage or all that can cause is far more damaging than a scam here or a scam there. But I take your point on the fact that we need to raise the relevant question. We need to put pressure on these institutions and hopefully reform them as well. We'll take a very quick break. This has been a fascinating debate. Back in a moment. Our panel stays with us. We've got a few more relevant questions for all of them. Back in a moment with the India Development Debate.
It's great to be back with you once again on the India Development Debate. We're discussing the situation of India's banks, particularly the controversies that plague ICICI Bank and also Axis. Mr. Roy, I'm going to start this round with you. The ratings agency Fitch points out that the reluctance of the bank and reluctance of ICICI Bank to support an independent external probe perhaps has created doubts over the strength of corporate governance norms and structures that were used in the bank really. Why do you believe the bank did not agree to an independent probe? And in hindsight, was that an error of judgment? Because there were charges of nepotism and conflict of interest and all of that. And an independent probe perhaps could have shut up the critics.
Oh, absolutely, Supriya. I mean, that has been my core point. I mean, I'm not here to make allegations or run down institutions. But the way the board conducted itself, I think it must seriously ask the question whether it was defending the individual or it was defending the institution. I think that is the core point here. And please understand that this is not about legality. It's not about legality. It is not about credit appraisal processes. This is about probity in public life. And especially when you're dealing with public funds, and banks is based solely on trust. The business of banks is based solely on trust. And in such a situation, I think even after 2,000 years, it's a tongue-in-cheek, but even after 2,000 years, Caesar's wife still needs to be above suspicion. That is the point. And in that particular case, if the bank had done an independent investigation, like with an internationally reputed law firm like Infosys did, or Chanda Kochhar has just stepped aside and allowed an investigation to happen, and then come back, which was the original call which some of us had taken, then there'll be no question. Nobody is alligating her, and nobody is saying that, passing a judgment on her at this moment. At least I am not. Sure. Because I don't know. The question is, as an ordinary public, I don't know.
Absolutely.
So I completely disagree. Sorry. Carry on.
Point
please.
taken.
Yeah.
Point taken.
So
Hemendra
that's
Zari,
the
very
point,
quickly,
yeah.
if I could come to you then, which is, what else can the bank or the board do to restore confidence? I understand, you feel that the best thing is for her to step down, but, for instance, would it be good if the board were to, since the board says it has disclosed all relevant information to the RBI, would it be in the best interest of transparency that the board, comes out with all its disclosures to the RBI on the issue of conflict of interest? Would it be right if the board were to appoint an independent third-party agency to investigate? Yes, the CBI is investigating, but a third-party forensic audit, into charges of conflict of interest. Would those two steps restore confidence?
You see, unfortunately, what the board of ICICI Bank has done, it has closed all these options, because it has basically come out and said she is clean. We have done, the bank has not done anything wrong. She has not done anything wrong. So now, how can it now come out and give out more information, especially if supposing that information again points more fingers, at her conduct? So that's what I'm saying. They so hurriedly went and they closed all their options. Now today it will be extremely embarrassing for them now to say we are going to appoint an external investigator, or that we are going to disclose the kind of correspondence we've had with Reserve Bank of India, because they have come out and said she is a model of probity and integrity. So now what can you do? They cannot go back on those words. Their chairman has come out. They have got a previous CEO and chairman in the form of Mr. Vagul to come and endorse her. So you have ruled out any other options now, because now you just have to continue to defend her, because you cannot do anything else.
Okay, you say you can't do anything else. The board has put itself in a tight spot there. But Mr. Sen, coming to you, and I really want to ask you this question, because I'm a part of the media, and the media gets its quote-unquote official off-the-record briefings from the CBI. I think, to my mind, there are two questions that I have for you this evening, and without casting any aspersion, as I have the highest regard for you and the institution that you've represented in the past, is CBI absolutely competent to probe a matter as complex as this? And B, what do you make of this select leak of information that happens, which is sometimes wrong? I mean, there were news channels and newspapers that reported that Chanda Kochhar will be questioned next, and there's a lookout circular that was issued for her, which wasn't really the case, and then subsequently a clarification came. None of these guys were smoking pipe, and none of these guys thought about this in their dreams. This was told to them, unofficial briefings that happen. So I'm just trying to say, how do you balance a fair probe without damaging reputation and institutions vis-a-vis competence?
Your question is very relevant. In the past, the CBI was reticent, but I find now CBI is not. And not only it is not, it leaks. Now, that is because the character of CBI has undergone a change from the time we were there 20 years ago. The manual was very clear about not naming accused persons, investigating them on the sly. Even searches, summonings were not reported. And there is, I think, a Supreme Court order. I'm not sure about the confidentiality of investigation. Now, somebody should go to the court and probably get an embargo on the CBI leaking out information. CBI has a spokesman. Only the spokesman should speak. I entirely agree with you that before the man is even convicted, the CBI had that standard. I remember we used to write, a Prime Minister of India is under investigation. Mrs. Gandhi was under investigation after the Shah Commission, and the CBI annual report would not name her, would only say the Prime Minister of India is under investigation. But now that reticence is gone, apparently it is not being controlled properly, and somebody must shut CBI up. When the investigation is on, CBI should remain absolutely reticent, not leak out. Their spokesman should speak, and possibly a Supreme Court order on the confidentiality of investigation should be renewed. I entirely agree that you cannot smirch somebody when he's only under investigations.
That's a point very well taken indeed, Mr. Shantanu Sen, and I appreciate you for being honest and candid on that front. I've got very little time on the show. Closing comments first to you, Ila Patnaik. In a minute, the three things that you do. We've spoken a lot about all that's wrong, all the all the corners where we can pin the blame. But three things that you believe need to be done for us to sort of fix the rot in the banking system. I know it's a debate in itself, and I'm asking you to give me an answer in a minute, but quickly, if you could tell us three things that need to be done.
Revisit the Banking Regulation Act and look at the powers of the RBI, look at the functions of the board and the management. That's one. Second is repeal the Bank Nationalization Act, because I think this is not just about public sector banks, not just about private sector banks, but also about public sector banks. And third, revisit the RBI Act and see what role it plays, what are the conflicts of interest, why is it that it is failing to give us good banking supervision.
Mr. T.K. Mitra, then let you have the last word on the show. And, Ms. Ila Patnaik highlights three important points. My question to you is different. When the PNB fraud came to light, everybody suddenly began the narrative of privatized public sector banks. Why have government ownership and control? Suddenly that narrative seems to have been put on the back burner. Do you believe that's the collateral damage on account of that? Or do you believe that kind of explains the fault lines that exist on both sides of public and private sector lenders?
Well, it is a very large debate which needs to happen on this private sector versus public sector. But my firm view is, while de jure RBI may not have powers in law, but de facto they have full powers to supervise public sector banks. I don't think government has ever disagreed with their recommendation on any aspect of management, any aspect of management. And that I say with a lot of confidence and a lot of authority. So, but I would agree that there is a lot of reforms to be done, and there are reforms of process, there are reforms of HR, there are reforms required in public sector banks substantially. But I would agree with Madam Patnaik that regulatory supervision needs to improve substantially. There is no denying of it. It needs to be done with a lot of technological support. They need to use a lot of experts. They need to do a lot of, not the transaction audit, but a lot of process audit, whether things are happening as per the process laid down. That's itself is a challenge. For example, in case of PNB, if the IT audit was done properly, it was supervised that the audit is being done by somebody who is competent, these issues would have come up. So the question would be, we need to move to process audit, not transaction audit, and this is one of the suggestions which should be considered. But the question remains, supervision needs to improve, public sector banks need to improve, and there the issues of HR and whether holding company to be made or not to be made, all those need to be decided. We can't put them in cold storage. But public sector banks, they need to continue. And you have to go to a rural area to see that which is the banking channel available there. While we may criticize public sector banks, but see that they are the only guys available in that area. There is not a private sector bank available in deep down in any tribal area or any other area. So I think that's a fact that we need to realize.
Oh yes, it's for sure rekindled that debate, and for now, not too many people are in the camp that says privatize public sector banks. Suddenly, much has changed. But this wonderful panel has surely given us a cue for what should well be the next debate on the show one of these days, and that is on what more needs to be done. A show with a positive agenda on what more needs to be done to fix the rot in the banking sector for a change, not just the PSU banking sector. Thank you so much for being with us, Supriya.
Thank you, wonderful panel, for being with us and sharing your views. We'll have to call it a day here, completely out of time. Up next is Top 10 at 10 with Tanya Bharadwaj.
Good night.